Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu News Analysis with us. And before proceeding, I would like to remind you about a very interesting, effective and beneficial workshop that is going to be conducted on 16th March. Nowhere else but only on our channel Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Now this begins at 6 p.m. and the purpose is that it is a free workshop which is a must attend for those candidates who are looking for some serious, critical, important preparation strategies for the upcoming UPSC CSE 2025 from one of our best faculties. So do tune in and take the workshop. Now, with that, let's quickly proceed with today's important news articles, and today's discussion is a complete mix and match between different domains. We have here 3 articles taken from the mains perspective, ranging right from Uniform Civil Code to the controversy regarding poor Indian education sector performance, alongside the controversy regarding how some Indians have been trafficked illegally, unethically into the war zone. With this, we shall do a quick analysis of prelims articles which are shorter and more factual, which talk about how Assam is doing something that nobody has ever thought of before. It is trying to denotify a critical habitat for one-horned rhinoceros. What are the reasons and what does the Supreme Court has to say? Apart from that, we are talking about another very big episode that is raking the nation right now. So we know, apart from the electoral bond controversy, we are also heading towards the topic of one nation, one election. So we take a quick opinion on that, and of course we will talk about how India and United Kingdom are signing, which is very unusual, an FTA between 2 developed economies of the globe. So what are the ramifications? What are the problems in the path? With that, let's proceed with the very first article for the day, picked up from you from page 11, the Hindu Newspaper of today, the New Delhi edition. The article corresponds to social justice, and the core of the article is a complaint that India's education sector is not performing well. Why? Because the annual status of education report 2023 has highlighted that 86.8% of people in India, young Indian adolescents from the age group of 14 to 18, who are enrolled in school, but unfortunately they cannot read even a class 2 level grade book fluently, neither in English nor sometimes in their own regional language. Now this talks volumes about the failure of our education system, and therefore the article tries to find out the reasons and give you certain suggestions. The reasons at the core of the article are: 1. India lacks a systematic pedagogy. What is pedagogy? Pedagogy talks about teaching methodology. How does an educator or a teacher impart lessons to students? The style and format of teaching refers to pedagogy. Now, India is very poor as compared to global averages, Asian averages, when it comes to the format of teaching. Second problem at the heart of the article is inability. Now, let's understand that education in India is a concurrent subject. So, which means as per Schedule 7, it is the state and the central government both who can take decisions on it. However, when we talk about curriculum, who decides the curriculum for various government-run schools across Indian states? It is always the State Board of Education. Apart from that, there are certain standard guidelines borrowed from the NCERT, and therefore it is the duty of the state government to ensure that the curriculum is getting supplied to the government schools. Not only curriculum, but also infrastructure needs to be set up. Hence, this is poor in India. So government expenditure at the state governmental level is quite low when it comes to education in respective states. Why is it low? We shall see shortly. Now, the third point that the article talks about is misinterpretation of the educational system itself. Because we in our country for a very long time now have been focusing on one-way learning. Today what we need is not standard education, but we need learning outcomes. The article points at the problem of poor learning outcomes only because India still follows a very, very unilateral mode of teaching. So what is this unilateral mode of teaching is something that we shall talk about, and why does it need to be replaced by a multilateral or a multidimensional mode of teaching? So let's remember that education is one of those commitments that India has made along with other countries as a part of Sustainable Development Goals. Now, goal number 4 talks about how we need to ensure equitable and how we need to ensure respectable, inclusive, high-quality education for all the people across the globe by 2030. Now, India is a key signee or a key advocate of the SDG 4. And in this slide, the fact that our educational outcomes are so poor is something definitely wrong. So hence, the basic thing that the article highlights is that if 86 and more % of Indian students today, who are one of the critical components of our young working population. Now, when we say 14 to age group of 18, we are talking about people who are already in the demographic dividend bracket. These are the people who are soon to participate in Indian workforce, and if they do not have the reading, writing and learning capacity comparable to that of a 5 to 6-year-old child, then this talks about how poorly we are doing. So this points out, as per the article, to a learning deficit, a learning gap really that exists. Why? Because most of the times when people talk about success of education, we see it very structurally, right? There are two aspects to it, okay? Let's talk about the quantitative aspect of education and let's talk about the qualitative aspect of education. Both are important in the discourse of universal education. Now, in India, when we talk about what are the problems of education sector, we always talk about poor enrollment rate. That most people or most students in India are not even enrolled in schools. They don't go to schools. So despite having the Article 21A, that came to India's constitution via the 82nd Amendment Act, which talks about inculcating compulsory basic education to all children from the age group of 6 to 14. That is basic minimum we are talking about. Apart from that, we also later introduced the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, under which we must also focus not only on primary, but middle education as well. Having said that, despite all that, today we see not all children are attending school, and particularly the dropout rate of those who were already in schools but they dropped out increased more for boys as compared to girls post the pandemic era. Again, this was a paradox before, because before pandemic it was girls who experienced poor enrollment and high dropout rate. But after the pandemic, owing to work compulsions and poverty, it was boys in the age group of 14 to 18 who got pulled out of schools. There was a heavy dropout, and at the same time, the working population in the unorganized sector from the same age group registered an increase. So we know where they went and why. Why did this leakage happen? Now, apart from that, we always focus on this, enrollment and dropout. What about those who are already in schools and who are not dropping out? Who learn, who study, and they complete their school education? What about them? So here comes the qualitative aspect. Even if they are attending school, we need to focus upon why is in our country even today we are focusing on rote learning. Now, as per the article, the standard mode of teaching in most of the government school is that a teacher will come to the classroom, she or he will write down notes or briefs on the board. The children will copy them, or they shall be given some homework. Now, this has no aspect of innovation. This has no aspect of bi-party participation. Here, it's like a passive learning model, which I call the unilateral mode. The education is not getting transmitted. It is the information that is being sent. There is a difference between education and information. Information can be a one-way process from one person to the other. It can be unilateral. But education cannot happen in this mode. It has to be bilateral. It has to happen when there is a dialogue. Because until you understand that whether your pupil or your student has understood something, unless or until she or he questions you back, or you make them question you back by giving them thought-provoking assignments, or you pinpoint at them and ask them questions, you will never know as a teacher whether they are learning or not. And this is the problem here. A bigger reason is poor incentives for teachers itself. It's a very deep problem. It's complex because when government schools teachers are underpaid, when most of the time, now say for an average, in 7 days of the week, the school will operate for 5 days or 5.5 days, half day of Saturday including in most government schools, the teachers will not even on an average be teaching for 3 days if you calculate the output out of 5 days. Why? Because most of the times they are busy in activities which are non-academic in nature, sharing the midday meal with students, or some of them are registering the data about that. Some of them often have to go for election duties. Some of them often have to go for census operations. Some of them, if they are working in the primary education department, comes a problem like pandemic or comes a problem like any natural calamity, some of them are also derouted into those jobs, which means that the kind of time and energy that they are giving with a poor salary on academic quality development is very, very poor, which means nobody would want to skill upgrade unless they have an economic incentive to do that, and that's happening here. Therefore, teachers are here not creating an environment which is a learning environment, an environment that is participative, innovative, where teachers relate to the students rather than just putting information blanket upon them. So that is the problem. Unilateral mode of education. And hence even those who are in schools are not learning much that will be called as some kind of productive outcome. Also, let's remember that children and parents both therefore also find sometimes no reason to go to school. They can read the textbooks at home. They can just go for the exams. There is a huge absenteeism of students in government schools. But this absenteeism is obviously because of the poor learning outcome and, the rote learning method or the unilateral method, but there's a bigger reason. Now, if we look at the data, data across, say, performing grading index. Now, performance grading index was an index that was created under the Ministry of Education back in 2017, which has constantly highlighted the poor learning outcomes across many, many states. For example, there was a case study done on Arunachal Pradesh which said that, as per the report of this performance grading index just 2 years back, which said that most of the times in government schools, there is a lack of separate toilets for girls and boys, not even clean access to sanitation. Most other times, there is a problem regarding infrastructure, poor quality seating, poor quality tables, no stationery being provided by school. No kind of learning material that is innovative. So today, to engage with these students, we do not need to put a blanket of knowledge on them. There are enough ways of acquiring knowledge in today's world where most people have an access to internet and computers. What we really are talking about is, if the state governments are required to spend a good amount of money on funding government schools, then where is the money going really? Because in schools today, we are not seeing, especially in government schools, sensory learning material, the touch and feel learning material. That's missing. We are lacking interactive books, which not only include illustrations, diagrams, but data, pictures, and real case studies. We also learn the infrastructure to make a smart classroom. The value of smart classroom, also highlighted through the National Education Policy 2020, is not merely in the fact that students learn digital technology. No, the real benefit lies in the fact that if a classroom is smart, if it is using Internet of Things, if children have access to interactive material, then the teachers are not teachers anymore. They become facilitators. And that's what we need to do. Apart from that, once this kind of spending by the government is missing, naturally children will not come to schools. Another controversy is the lack of proper implementation of schemes like midday meal scheme. Now, we all know that in certain states, there are cultural problems because of which midday meal scheme could not be as successful as it was supposed to be. Now, initially, for example, in the states of Karnataka, it was doing very, very good. In most of the tier 1, tier 2 cities, children were coming to government schools in double the number, only after the midday meal scheme. But then there was a controversy regarding food that's being provided. There was a religious battle about non-vegetarian food, sattvika food, or what kind of food are you giving them. So sometimes cultural religious biases came and they changed the menu in the line of a menu which students did not like. They found it very palatable. They did not like the taste, and therefore, if they are not finding it palatable, they stopped again coming to school. So there are many, many things we need to talk about here. Now, apart from that, there is also one very interesting thing that the article points out, the problem of rote learning. We require our students to learn cram material without being innovative about it. So unless you teach a student to learn the techniques that education is giving them to solve a problem of today's world. For example, there is no point in just teaching, even for example, AI, just in a unilateral mode. What is AI and why was it made and all? Unless you give a challenge to a student that how a certain problem can be solved through AI. That's when you realize whether the student can translate the learning in the real world. That's missing. Another important thing is that teachers here should need some better training. Now, this is something that is being long considered by the National Council of Teachers Education, which is now already after the 2022 government's commitment to implement the National Mission on Mentoring. Under this, teachers across schools in India will be provided hands-down training by best of professionals in the industry. Once the teachers are better trained, not only in curriculum but also in how to teach, in pedagogy, probably the learning outcomes will become better. Now, a very interesting thing comes to my mind when I read this article, that when we talk about today's sales and marketing, say e-commerce, or whenever these companies are trying to sell products to their customers, they are doing customized marketing or target marketing. They know which customer likes what, and accordingly they use machine learning to increase their sales pitch. But then why can't we do something similar in education? Why can't every child or most children divided into groups be taught in a customized way? Because yes, children do display different kinds of interests and needs. They do not learn at the same pace. So if we can have the customization model in industry, that is the e-commerce industry or the sales industry, the FMCG industry, then why is it missing from education? We need a customized mode of curriculum, content, interaction, and teachers who are passionate about teaching. So all in all, at the heart of the article, we must understand that children will display gender differences. Right? So today we cannot just say that we are teaching boys and girls. Probably gender is also very fluid today, so we need to accommodate, we need to be accommodative. Apart from that, there could be religious biases, there could be special needs and disabilities, there could be neurological diversities among students. There could be autism-related disorders. So what we need to focus upon is first to create a proper hard infrastructure. The government needs to spend more on creating safe, sanitary, clean, inviting schools, which does need expenditure, but the results are wonderful. And if the government cannot spend in hard infrastructure, government can also do it in a flipped classroom mode, half online, half offline. Come to schools for physical experiments, experiments like laboratory experiments in science or assignment-based. Sit at your home or sit in a group where the government can provide online lessons too, recorded lessons too. Many innovations can be done here to bridge the gap, to take care of absenteeism. Poverty could also lead to absenteeism, but we need to calculate that on a customized basis. So today what we need is not the kind of learning which is imposed, but a kind of learning which is coming from the students themselves, right? So no repetition, that's not going to help us. We need to build cognitive ability. So the need of today is not to focus on the right to education only. We need to focus on the right to learning. While education can stop after a certain time if it's formal, but learning is something that continues all along. In the same light, teachers need to be educated too, and there has to be a better two-way communication that is focusing on a very Montessori model, in fact, which is about touching, feeling, learning the material, asking questions, being in the classroom and being cognitively engaged with the topic, where you are being asked, not just being told things. So unless that ownership or the onus is taken by the government and the teachers, student engagement cannot happen properly, which explains the poor educational outcomes that we are having today. That's what the article says. And now to the second article of the day. This is page number 12. This goes to international relations. And it is a very sad revelation. Nothing new though. But it feels bad to know that there are many Indians who got caught in the Russia-Ukraine war. Not merely ideologically, but physically. Yes, there were people from India who were trapped in this human trafficking network. When the CBI investigated, it got to know some very soul-searing details about how people were trapped, they were duped, they were lied to, they were conned, and then they were trafficked to Russia. Agencies working in Russia and India together were responsible for this kind of fraud. And once they landed in Russia, they were made fake promises, but eventually they found themselves landed in the conflict zone, which they were not prepared of. Remember, they were not army personnel, they were not trained people, they were not paramilitary, they were citizens, civilians who had no idea, no knowledge of dealing in a war situation, and they found themselves there, fighting a war of the unknown with the unknown, in an unknown way. So that's something that the article talks about. What does it say about the safety and what does it say about the protocols of human trafficking? Now let's understand the problem is not that simple. If it is only about human trafficking, yes, the government can take a big responsibility and stop it from happening. But what if it happens with the blessing of the government? Then what? So human trafficking here, in the case of Russia-Ukraine war, is something that the government was not aware of, and today the government is ready to take an action. But what about so many Indian blue-collar workers which are caught up in the Middle Eastern markets, who are working there as very poorly paid, very unhygienically placed, lied to, underpaid employees who are in the mining sector, construction sector, service sector? What about those who recently the Indian government selected from the states of Uttar Pradesh, Haryana to send to Israel, because Israel, owing to the war, is experiencing a lack of labor force? What about that? That everybody knew. And then why was it taken as a decision? Just because poverty and unemployment rates have been soaring all along in a country like India, which probably could lack anything, but definitely we have an excess of human capital. But does that mean that our human capital is meant to be deployed in war zones and places like Israel, which are so unsafe? So the article talks about a very, very big and deep question. So the key problems highlighted here by the article are that the death of 2 Indian nationals, as they happened while being involved in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which was highlighted by the CBI raids, which then found out a racket that was going on, which was trafficking these Indian laborers and landing them as security helpers in Russia. Now remember, these people were not told that you will be sent to war. They were just said that you will get some better employment opportunity abroad. That is a reason enough for an average Indian poor underpaid laborer to migrate. Hence, they did that. And once they reached there, they were told that they shall just be military helpers. They will find a job that is with or in association with the military, but that is not a combat exercise. You will just do probably some kind of assistance or relief work with the Russian military. And hence these people were transported there. These people found jobs through social media and local agents who were the conning agencies responsible behind giving fake lucrative promises of employment in Russia, it seems. And now the Indian government and the Russian government today are having a bilateral talk about how to investigate in such rackets further, because not only is it dehumanizing, but also in a major way it could tomorrow tarnish the strong bilateral relations between the both countries. So now a group of 7 people from Punjab and Haryana, they have released a set of videos where they are claiming, they are complaining, they are very, very in distress that they arrived in Russia on tourist visas and they were told that you will help the Russian army as helpers. But in reality, what happened? They found themselves engaging in proper combat military operations owing to the war. Now remember that these are the people who were not even trained in these operations. So with minimal training, with minimal heads up, if somebody is placed on a war zone, imagine the kind of physical and psychosocial trauma that the person will experience. Tarnishing, probably dehumanizing them for a lifetime, really. So this was something very, very disturbing, as it was pointed out that approximately 100 Indians were recruited in Moscow. And the actual number, in fact, could be much, much higher. Apart from that, many recruits had to sign a contract. The contract said that you cannot exit Russia or Moscow once you are hired for the job before 6 months or sometimes even before 1 year. Sometimes the passports are confiscated. They are not allowed to return. Their documents are confiscated by the hiring agencies. In the garb of giving employment, worst is yet to come. Sometimes they are not paid. Sometimes they cannot contact their family back homes in India. So imagine the kind of social trauma it leaves behind. Now, once this reality has come in light, it was also noticed that such rackets that are going on, whether it be a cyber crime or whether it be somebody creating a fake propaganda on social media, happen on a multi-state basis. In fact, on a multinational basis. Not only are these duping agencies across various cities in India, they are also located abroad. They have a very good connectivity between them. So today the SBI is trying to crack down on such existing networks, but in reality, how many of them operate clandestine, secretly? We do not know. And then investigation also revealed that these people were, as I said, forced into the war zone. Later, they were also promised that if you finish the assignment, we will provide you free upskilling or free higher education and give you a permanent job. But it points out to a bigger reality, as I said. Is this event enough? Is it the only eyewash for us? Or have there been previous episodes which people are oblivious to? Now, you might remember very interestingly as the whole world was dancing on the drums of the Qatar World Cup, the FIFA Football Cup, which was a celebrated event, which it always is in fact. How many people actually went to the depth of seeing the sad and heart-melting plight of those labourers coming from countries of India, sometimes Vietnam, sometimes sub-Saharan Africa or other African countries, South American labourers who were pushed to death. Death by heat stroke, death by dehydration, death by malnourishment, death by lack of medical care, and death by forced work that would sometimes exceed 12 hours per day in a temperature in Qatar that was soaring above 50 degrees Celsius. Imagine. So as you celebrate events, it's sometimes not even realized the secret unsung deaths behind them. Now this is the sad reality of labor migration. You see, in one of the articles 2 days back, we were talking about how this globalization has spelt wonders for some, say the very high-skilled labor force, the white collar. On the other hand, it has also spelt devastation and death and starvation to those who fall below the realm, who are the ghosted employees, as I say always, who are working in the blue-collar segments of mining, cleaning, or class 4 level employment opportunities. What about those people who are into manual physical work or pink collar jobs or say grey collar security jobs? What about them? So they migrate on promises of better payment abroad. They land up in such situation where they are nothing, but they end up becoming victims of such clear-cut social dumping. Fine if it happens as a part of personal compulsion, there is limited action that the government can take. But when, from 2019 to 2023, Indian embassies in Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar and Saudi Arabia together received 48,000 and above labor complaints from Indian migrant labor force, which reported that they were forced into labor. And all these labor conditions that they were working under are clearly against the rules of International Labour Organization, to which India is a signee. Out of 8 compulsory standard ILO conventions, India has ratified 6 of them, which clearly abolish underpayment of wages, which clearly talk about acting against worst forms of labor, unsafe, dangerous labor and child labor. But then when underage laborers migrate to work there in oil-rich countries, resource-rich countries which have money and opportunities but lesser blue-collar labor, why doesn't anybody say anything at that point of time? Where does the human rights issue go? We can calculate it in the form of foreign remittances, but do we see this money? How is it earned? Apart from that, in May 2023, India entered into an agreement with Israel to send around 42,000 workers. Where? To war zone? Now, is that the ugly side of blue-collar industry that we are talking about? People dying and suffering and highly underpaid, where the other people of the country just are mute observers, including the government. There are an estimated 9 million Indian workers in the GCC countries, most of whom are working in low-skilled jobs. Now, look at the paradox. They are suffering with social dumping, working under poor, unsafe, dangerous, underpaid, extended conditions, and yet they do it. Why? Because still the low-paying job that they are doing and dying pays them higher than the national minimum wage standard. So the article has left us behind with so many disturbing questions, and with that we proceed with the other article of the day coming from page 14 to you. It's polity, and yes, it is about the historic decision taken by the state government of Uttarakhand, where it has now officially implemented the Uniform Civil Code. We are talking about Article 44 of the Constitution, a provision in the directive principles of state policy, a directive to the government, not a compulsion. And yet, the controversy is raging. The controversy is raging between whether a law like Uniform Civil Code, which says that across at least 5 areas of civil life, including marriage, divorce, succession of property, inheritance rights, maintenance after breaking down of marriage or a relationship, and adoption, are these under the ambit of the government legally? Should the Indian government decide how various religious and cultural communities across India follow rules regarding these 5 areas, or should it be left to them? Is the implementation of UCC an infringement of the rights given under Article 25 of the Constitution, the right to freely practice, propagate and profess your own culture and religion. Article 29 given to minorities. Article 28, Article 27. Article 21, right to life and liberty. Are these infringements upon that or no? So that's the debate which the article has opened, getting massive retaliation from minorities and other civil society groups across the country. So now that we know UCC is a set of laws which says that the government will create same laws throughout India for all the citizens and communities, where we talk about marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance and succession of property. Article 44. Now, Uttarakhand has become the first state in India to actually implement the UCC. It has finally received the signature from Honorable President and now it has become a law. So the bill, however, has kept tribals out of its domain. Now, many students have often asked me also the question that tribals, I always say, are unique in India because of their very, very diverse, different and, isolated subculture. And tribal rights need to be protected. You cannot homogenize the life of tribals. It's not fair. So what happens if UCC is a pan-India implementation? But then clearly the law says that tribals are not in the ambit. So leaving tribals, or everybody else in the state will have to follow these when it comes to basic areas of life such as these. So bill, actually, whatever you criticize it by saying, whatever minority persecution people are blaming the bill for, in reality it is a very pro-woman initiative. So women have reasons to celebrate here. Because when you create same laws for every religion and every culture, it's women and children who benefit the most. Now, I don't mean to say that culture in a society is misogynistic. That's not my intention here. But what I am trying to say is that most of the laws when it comes to marriage, adoption and divorce are somewhere patriarchal. And it is a legacy of the culture. It's not like today we are doing something new to it, but that's how we have inherited them. Besides, when society and economic realities change, people should change as well because social life is dynamic. Economy is dynamic. Things change from one generation to another. So in the garb of today's reality, where women vis-a-vis men are having a very different kind of expectations from life, continuing with age-old laws sometimes does not justify, and therefore UCC could be a very, very important emancipator to women, because it clearly says that women now will have every right and equal right just like men in inheritance and property. That's good. Apart from that, it also says that since all citizens will be given equal right, pretty much in the light of Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, of course, as well as Article 15 and 16 too, which talk about equality across various spheres irrespective of gender and religion. The oppression of women will also stop now. It will create social equality because, for example, when you talk about certain customs which have been in scanner by public, such as polygamy, the fact that one man can marry many women, or polyandry, where one woman can marry many men. So if such things are allowed by culture, today the UCC stands to ban them. Apart from that, it also bans triple talaq. Now remember the 2019 verdict, right, which actually stopped the practice of talaq-i-biddat, that women could not be now dumped on the basis of just pronunciation of a divorce by a man until it is done by the said procedure of the respective law. So that is something that we are thinking about. We are thinking about halala, again one custom which women sometimes have claimed to be derogatory to their status. Now, apart from that, we know that from 2005 onwards, even in the Hindu community, they have to provide equal inheritance rights to girls because girls have co-parcenary rights after 2014 law of the government. When I say co-parcenary, I mean that girls, even in Hindu families, joint families, will have every right to inherit their parents' property because otherwise that doesn't happen. Girls are only given a share of the movable property, not immovable property like land and houses. So movable property is often then under the garb of dowry, whether it's jewelry or any other movable item, right? So, hence in that case, these UCC laws will spell equality for women. For example, somebody who's committing the practice of halala could probably be imposed with a fine and an imprisonment that is quite on the higher side, say rupees 1 lakh or 3 years of imprisonment. Similarly, the bill also says marriage as a procedure set by law will be solemnized or conducted only between man and a woman. So it has outlawed as of now homosexual marriage, which the Supreme Court has been considering for a long time now. Similarly, it also says that the age of marriage, of course, is as of now the same, 21 for boys and 18 for girls. Also, the government is thinking of increasing the girls' marriageable age once again to 21. But as of now, it has fixed it to 21 for boys and 18 for girls. Similarly, another very unique initiative that UCC of Uttarakhand has taken is about live-in relationships. A lot of people in India have been talking about the controversial nature of live-in relations. It says that if somebody is out of marriage in a live-in relationship with somebody, it is mandatory that the live-in relationship will have to be registered. If the live-in relationship is not registered, then there could be an imprisonment for up to 3 months and a fine of ₹25, sometimes both, or another form of punishment. People, at least the youngsters, believe that it is an infringement of right to privacy. Again, it's an infringement of right to life, right to freedom, Article 19. Is it so? Not really. Again, the purpose here is to protect women. Why? Because most of the times, women who are in live-in relations, they do not have any document or proof to show that they have been cohabiting a man for a long time. Now, tomorrow, if the man and the woman choose to walk out of the relationship, sometimes one partner dumps the other. Sometimes one partner is financially not stable enough to manage. Sometimes there are children born out of such relations. What about them? It's very unfair to leave them without any rights. So therefore, Today Uttarakhand's decision is not new. Please remember, back in 2005, the Honorable Supreme Court of India had taken a very, very radical and interesting decision. It said that live-in relationship is right to life, and therefore, in case of live-in relationship also, since it is pretty much in nature like a married relationship, women in a living relationship will be protected under the Domestic Violence Act 2005. Just like wives are, all live-in partners will also be. That was the first time the Supreme Court gave some respect to live-in relationship and acknowledgement. Besides, in 2023, the High Court of Punjab and Haryana clearly said that if somebody is found to be in a live-in relationship without taking a divorce from their spouse, this will be considered as bigamy. Once again, it is giving a proper legal acknowledgement to live-in relationship. That is why being in a live-in relationship despite being married to somebody else is bigamy, right? Similarly, in 2023, September 1, there was an article in the Hindu newspaper, if you remember, which spoke about how children who are born in a live-in relationship will also be given, and they can claim some right in the property, both acquired and created by their parents. So again, they acknowledged the birth of children who are born out of wedlock. Now, similarly, they also said that a woman can also tomorrow claim some share in the property of a man whom she has been cohabiting. The man may have to give her a maintenance in case she is supposed to be financially broke. She cannot be dumped and left behind. So here it is not about infringing freedom. It is about ensuring that within marriage and outside marriage, women experience some safety. That is something we need to understand before we fall into further controversy. Now, similarly, it also says that any couple who is marrying has to register the marriage and also register the divorce. Now, this sometimes is also very interesting because you might have heard how in the western peninsular region of India, there for a very long time it has come to light that there is a custom that's very disturbing again. These are known as one-night marriages, where people from Middle Eastern countries have been coming in, marrying young girls. Rather, they are sold off by their parents into marriage by taking some kind of bride price from the man. Sometimes it's a very old man who's marrying a very young girl. It almost becomes like trading of women. And these marriages are then broken very easily. Why? Because there is no proper registry being done. How can the government support the victims there? So to stop that, this is being done. Similarly, in case a man and a woman take a divorce, even if the woman doesn't have enough money, even if she is not resourceful, she still will be given the custody of the child until the child is 5 years old. Again, this is revolutionary because most of the times women in India, since they are very less in the working force, they are dependent on other people in the family financially, particularly the husband. In that case, they are deprived of their parenting rights, which is also akin to child abuse, given the age of the child. So therefore, it is revolutionary in some ways. Also, let's remember that a child who is born out of marriage is not illegitimate. The child is the legitimate child of the couple because they were the ones who are the parents, even if it is a live-in relationship. So why will you deny the property rights? That is also very important, and Now, also let's remember that legitimate and illegitimate children, this kind of a very dehumanizing gap without any fault of the child is also reduced now. Now, this also reminds me recently, just few months back, in fact last year, the Supreme Court also noticed that sometimes when after a live-in relationship or after a broken marriage, people just forcefully impose DNA testing on children to find out whether the child is actually the child of the stated father. Now, that also Supreme Court said should not be allowed easily, because that is dehumanizing to the child. A child is not a commodity. So therefore, unless enough investigation and reasons are found, a child cannot be subject to such treatment. That was also something you must remember. Similarly, whether a child is adopted, whether a child is coming through surrogacy, whether a child is coming through IVF, any other assisted reproduction technique, they are all legitimate children and shall be given the right of property. After the death of a person, if a woman becomes a widow, she and the children will share the rights of the husband equally. Again, very interesting. Why? Because let's remember, we often say that India today is moving towards demographic transition. We were discussing this just 2 days back, that although still until 2021, as per United Nations, we will have a young population, but after that suddenly, number of old people will increase. We are heading towards becoming an old society. In that case, what happens? Typically, the lifespan of women is longer than that of men, right? So life expectancy for women is longer. Women on an average live at least 4 to 5 years, sometimes 10 years longer than men. Hence, old age widows are also being subjected to a lot of harassment because they do not have any property and neither are they in any situation of beginning an entrepreneurship, and plus there are cultural biases too. So allowing a widow a share in her husband's property will also protect her from this kind of abandonment and abuse. So indeed, it does volumes for women, and it is yet to be seen what kind of reactions come after it is imposed today. Now, the next article is page 16. A short article, but it is talking about an unusual development, and the development is that the state of Assam has requested the Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court, that there is a particular area in Assam that is known for its biodiversity. I know you're thinking about Kaziranga. Of course, Kaziranga is a rich national park which boasts of biodiversity, particularly one-horned rhinoceros. But apart from Kaziranga, in Assam there is also some protected wildlife area which is known as Mini Kaziranga. And this Mini Kaziranga's name is Pabitra or Pobitora. It's a very Bengali connotation. So Pobitora Wildlife Sanctuary. It is an area once again rich and very, very famous for its one-horned rhinoceros population. Some people say this is the globally highest region with one-horned rhino population. Hence, it is a declared wildlife sanctuary. And it was declared long, long back, say for example in 1998 itself. But today the government of Assam feels that when it was declared in 1998 as a protected area, the state government was not consulted properly. It was a decision taken arbitrarily by the Forest Department, who issued a notification and took an action. They sealed that area. The government got no opportunity to think about the people living in that area. Today, this area is also inhabited by certain tribals and villagers who typically come from marginalized segments of society like SC scheduled tribes and other nomadic tribes. They were dependent on the forest. So their forest rights were not thought about properly. These are people who do not have any formal employment. So while creating the wildlife area, the Forest Department was very insensitive to the needs of these people, and hence the Assam government has requested the Supreme Court to cancel the area that is delimited or fixed as the Pobitura Wildlife Sanctuary, but the Supreme Court has expressed a shock over this. It says this is unparalleled in history. Once created, that too for legitimate reason, a proper wildlife sanctuary or a national area cannot be reversed. How can we denotify that today? That will be very much against the interest of ecology and biodiversity, particularly of a species whose population is not very big. It is still an endangered species, right? So therefore, this is the controversy that has broken out. Now, the government has said that the sanctuary was declared without properly settling the rights, including rights of areas such as Mayong, Murkata, Tengabhanga. Most of the people who live here are scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, nomadic, OBC people, and they have been living here much before independence time, much before 1947. Then why were their rights taken away? The state government also has said that the Forest Department has no right to monitor and administer a land that is fallow, known as Khas in local language, the Khas land or the Khas land. And yet it has been covered and included in the sanctuary forcefully. It has been fenced. What right did the forest government had to do that? And Assam cabinet is saying, please therefore denotify that area from prime one-horned rhino habitat to certain area that is now taken away from the Pabitra Wildlife Sanctuary, which is situated almost about 50 kilometers near Guwahati. So environmental activists in fact are saying that what logic is this? After 26 years suddenly you are getting a wake-up call. After 26 years, after the Assam Forest Department has declared the Pabitra Wildlife Sanctuary, that is March 17, 1998. How come suddenly you realize that it is not good for the people there? What about all these years? Various panels were made ad hoc. Various agitations were done by the government. Why did the government before not submit a plea to the Supreme Court? Why today? What happened? What's new? So therefore, the government at the center, some people, some ministers, as well as the Honorable Supreme Court, as well as environmentalists, therefore categorically said that it is very important to keep the area of Pabitra intact, because today it is housing the largest population of not only one-horned rhinoceros globally, also many other unique animals like, say, buffaloes, wild buffaloes, leopards, boars, barking deer, which again is something that needs to be protected. They need protection, and therefore what logic does it make to denotify mini Kaziranga as it is known as, owing to the similarity of landscape between main Kaziranga and Pobitora? It said that Pobitora's rhino population was calculated to be 107. That is the last census that was conducted in 2022, which means it has the highest concentration of one-horned rhinoceros population on the planet itself. Imagine the rich hotspot it is for this animal. So underlining the need, however, if you talk about the argument of the state government, they are saying that the villagers will get deprived of their right on forests. How will they access forest products to create their own livelihood? How will they interact with the forest if they are not supposed to go there? But they don't understand right now when they make this claim that allowing people entry into protected areas without enough regulation also tomorrow could lead to poaching. Already rhinoceros have been poached recklessly. The international market has a demand for rhinoceros horn. It is used in the Southeastern Asian countries for medications. They are believed to be miraculous, being anti-cancerous. Sometimes it's strange, but they also say that they cure genetic diseases. Even HIV can be potentially cured. Hence, it is sold in billions of dollars. They are very, very much in danger. In fact, few years back, the government itself took a decision and cut down the horn of some of the rhinoceros to protect their life. Now, today, if you denotify the area, will it not again create a kind of threat towards poaching? That is something also that we must consider. So the cabinet said that we are not saying that people here are not important. Let's take a new perspective on this. Rather than threaten the Pabitra sanctuary and denotify that, why can't we treat the local people, the villagers and the tribals who are living in the periphery of these villages as active partners in wildlife conversation? They can also conserve wildlife. It's a two-way process. It's a human ecology relationship. They are not alien to the problem of wildlife conservation. So why not we form a 5-member committee headed by Special Chief Secretary of the Forest to examine the benefit and the negatives of denotifying Pabitra. But without thorough investigation, no decision can be taken. The panel says that the report will be submitted after 6 months itself. Apart from that, the court is also saying that as of now, we cannot allow any denotification, and otherwise also you cannot denotify a protected area without adequate permission of the National Board of Wildlife as well as Supreme Court. Therefore, the declaration back in 1998, if it was implemented for 26 years, it is an act of the government. So today, if you are disowning it, it is only showing some double standards by you. With that, the article number, page number 16 is GS Paper 3 Economy. We are talking about the bilateral relationship of UK and India in the light of certain fresh developments. Now, let's remember that even before this, India had signed up an EFTA with certain countries of European Union. So, in that light, today we are talking about the British or the UK-India Free Trade Agreement. Now, this is something that both the countries have been negotiating for a very long time now. And almost 14 rounds of consultation and negotiations have been done, but unfortunately, recently last week, the United Kingdom delegates had to leave back to London, and yet there is no concrete decision that has taken place. Today also, both the countries met on 12th March and 13th March. There was a telephonic discussion between the heads of the state, the honorable leaders of both the countries, and yet proper concrete decision could not be taken. Why? Let's understand that already both the countries are one of the biggest bilateral trade partners to each other. There is a lot of migration between both the countries. They both are engaging in military operations and military exercises. But today the FTA is posing problems because of majorly three things. So let's quickly see what the article says. Now, the article says that the 14th round, which recently happened, also could not see much. Negotiations are on, and yet nothing is coming when you talk about the free trade agreement between both the countries. Both the countries are also showing a lot of hurry right now. So why this hurry? Hurry because India is leading up to the Lok Sabha election 2024. Once the election is notified by the Election Commission, the model code of conduct will be implemented, which means after that no deal can happen anyway. Similarly, in the later part of the year, UK might also see an election, which means that even in UK, things will be delayed. Now, at this time, understand please, at this time where a lot of focus is being given by various countries on making free trade agreements, it is the countries of ASEAN, led by Vietnam in Southeast Asia and also Mexico, which are grabbing a lot of trade opportunities with the developed countries. Now, they are cracking big FTA deals. In that case, if we do not hurry this, India might lose the opportunity of cracking this free trade agreement, which can spell wonders not only by increasing trade but also ease of business. Also, in a major way, access to good quality commodities, easy import-export between both the nations, and hence we do not want to miss this. That's why both countries are showing a lot of hurry. Already the bilateral trade between India and UAE has been leapfrogging very, very much. It reached about 20.36 billion USD back in 22-23, an increase of about, more than 3%. Similarly, if this deal is cracked, what happens? It will also provide a template, or it will also provide a milestone for the bigger European Union and India FTA, as I was just talking about, with certain countries of EU, including Liechtenstein and Switzerland. Now, let's understand that this FTA is also very, very important for India, because for India it is coming as a big learning lesson. Why? What is India trying to learn? Please understand that FTAs are not new, because FTAs only mean free trade agreements. It is an agreement, or these are agreements between two or more countries, sometimes many countries in one particular area, which aim at reducing trade barriers. Trade barriers, obstacle to free trade, including mutually agreed reduction on tariffs, taxes, import duty, export duty, license duty. What happens? If there is a lesser custom and import duty, export duty and tax, the trade becomes more free-flowing and the trade improves. It swells up immediately. And this trade includes not only trade in physical goods, also in services. Today, the modern day FDAs are also expanding to create trade in intellectual property, in government procurement and many, many other areas, including pharmacy, including medical, including defense. Now, having said that, India is finding this as a learning experiment also, because this can be dubbed as FTA 2.0, a fresh approach to India's FTA. Why? Because previously in the older approach, which can be known as, say, for example, FTA 1.0, the first wave of free trade agreement, where India, under the UPA government at that time, was focusing very heavily on Eastern trading partners. Right? Say with ASEAN or say with Japan. What happened? India was not very successful in these, because India at that time did not know how to pitch its own case. For example, even after a very prolonged trade with countries of ASEAN and Japan, India got very less results. Why? Because imports of India included, they expanded too much. They expanded like anything, while the exports could not increase too much. For example, from period of 2017-2022, the exports of India in the previous phase of FTA increased by 31%, while the imports swelled up by 82%. So clearly we had a poor balance of trade with these countries. Why? Because we had not learnt our lessons. But today things are different. The lessons are being well learnt and ready to be implemented. That is also the reason why this particular FTA is taking a long time, because today India is also not ready to give up so easily. It wants certain conditions to be met. So the article focuses on two such conditions. The biggest condition here, one is ROO, rules of origin, and the second, of course, is about reducing conditions on entry of skilled workers from India into US. These are the two areas of concern. So let me quickly explain to you what is the RRO condition. Before that, let's also be very clear that if this FTA is cracked successfully, it will further improve India's prospect of an FTA with other European countries, as I said just now, with countries such as Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Iceland. That's a bigger trading deal with other EU partners. Now, if the bigger deal of the economic European Union and India FTA becomes successful, then it could increase the flow of trade benefits to India owing to $100 billion of investment in just upcoming 15 years. But why is this particular FTA with UK taking time? As I said, India has learnt its lesson, and today we are very particular about 2-3 things. One thing is, we do not want to compromise with RRO. Now, RRO, as I said, talks about rules of origin. What are these? When I say rules of origin, it means that sometimes what happens, say for example, India signs an FTA with UK, right? Which means both the countries now can have bilateral flow of goods and services which are manufactured in both these countries. When they are signing an FTA, obviously they also have some agreement between the kind of ingredients that have gone in making those products. Certain do's and don'ts, such as no toxic chemicals being used, such as environmental regulations have to be met, ethical considerations have to be followed, which is okay because now already they have signed the FTA. But sometimes what happens, both the countries who sign an FTA between each other, what they do is that they simply start dumping their trading partner with products that are manufactured in third world countries. So what happens, for example, if in the light of sending UK products to India, UK starts flooding Indian market by products made in Thailand, then what? What can India do about it? How will India know? Because the label will be UK. It's coming from UK, of course. It's being imported from UK, so the label will say UK. And India will presume that these products are coming from UK. Hence, India will blindly trust them, that they are quality tested, they are following all the conditions of the FTA in terms of environment, carbon emission testing, in terms of treatment of animals, animal testing, or whatever conditions that both the countries have decided upon. But what if India comes to know that label was only UK? The core manufacturing happened in another third world country. Say, for example, in Thailand it happened, or in Vietnam it has happened. Now what can India do? Hence, there is a rule called rule of origin, which mandates that in case the good that is being supplied between the FTA partners has been manufactured to say up to more than 40% or 50% of its components are manufactured by a third world country, it has to be clarified. No country can gaslight each other. Nobody can cheat each other. You have to clarify how much of the production has happened in third world. Because sometimes if the production has happened in the third world countries which are not a part of FTAs between both these nations, they will have quality compromises. And cheap, untested, untrusted products will flood one industry. That has happened with India before in the first wave of FTA, and today India is not ready to compromise on RRO. Recently, the UK delegates also said that. Why is India having such a strict stand about RRO? Obviously, yes, because once burnt, twice shy. India now does not want that its market should be used as a dumping target by UK and by flooding it with lots and lots of products that are coming from countries which are unregulated. So RRO is causing delays. Yes, India will not now agree because it has a reason to claim that. Second thing is, India has also requested the UK to make the entry of India's white-collar skilled workers easy into UK. Also, with regards to blue-collar employees, India wants more transparency in the kind of working conditions that they will have. This also is a major cause of delay right now. The third cause of delay is that India says that we must remove the conditions imposed on import of Indian whiskey into UK. As of now, it needs 3 years of maturation period. India wants it to be reduced. Similarly, the UK also says that the Scotch whiskey that comes to India from UK, import duty should be reduced on that. Apart from that, tomorrow if the deal is signed and all these obstacles are overcome, if both sides are ready to cooperate, the biggest advantage will be that since one of the key areas of trade between both the country is clothing industry, textile industry, manufacturing industry primarily such as footwear, jewelry, it will open big market for India made products in the UK. Not only will it increase employment opportunities for Indians, it will also create much better demand for good quality Indian products that are core manufacture in India itself. So it will provide upskilling and employment opportunities. Besides, it will also earn better income for so many Indians. Apart from that, the FTA also provides for a new chapter itself on MSMEs, the micro, small and medium enterprises. It says that gender equality has to be one of the conditions now that both the countries are ready to sign an FTA. So in these lights, when both the countries are negotiating, it is yet to be seen what light does the FTA see. But all in all, I think India needs to be applauded for not back-treating, for not backstepping, and yet being insistent on creating a fair FTA. Now on that note, the last article of the day is equally important, coming to you from Polity GS paper 2. It talks about how the government has appointed a high panel committee headed by the ex-president or the former president of India, Shri Ram Nath Kovind. Now, this committee's duty is to examine and analyze the pros and cons of allowing one nation, one election agenda, which the incumbent or the current government is strictly talking about. So, let's understand two things. This ONOE, one nation, one election phenomena is not new. Please understand, it has happened in India in the past. India started its democracy with this. In between, it could not be accomplished. Today, again, we are talking about let's have it back. State governments, some of them are not happy. Opposition parties are also not happy. Some feel it is a subversion of federal democracy. Because as per the Article 1 of the Indian Constitution, India that is Bharat shall be a union of states. Which means that states have some identity too. Agreed, we are quasi-federal, but states have an importance. When you say one nation, one election, some states feel that you are almost trying to bypass the importance of state level election by combining it and aligning it with center. Because under this policy, it will be made compulsory that elections to Lok Sabha and various state assemblies will happen on the same day preferably. Same day, same time period, broadly. How will it help? As per the current government, there are benefits. One of the biggest benefits of it is that it will save cost. Separate elections are more expensive. Parallel elections will be cheaper because everything can happen at the same time. Second reason, it will also make life easy for administrative officials and security officials because separate elections means round the year they have to be on duty. One election means it will be a short-term headache, but in the longer term, they can focus on other things. Third thing, the government can also focus more on development jobs if election is finished in one day. Rather than separate elections, when the governments are in election mode all the year through, there is hardly any time to do the development task. Fourth, it will also enable better voter turnout. In fact, one of the law commissions in India had also said that if this is implemented, as per the law, voter turnout will be higher. More people will come out to vote because they can cast their votes parallelly on the same day. It saves them also time and energy. These are the pros, but there are certain negatives. The biggest negative is that first, to create agreement between states, all the states and center will not be easy. It's a major change. Second thing, it will need certain constitutional amendments to be done. So one of the law commissions in India, for example, the law commission that was created back in 2018, chaired by Justice B.S. Chauhan, clearly said that simultaneous elections are not feasible. Why? Because they will need amendment to existing clause of the constitution, and then these amendments should be ratified by at least 50% of the states. So we are talking about special majority here. That will be needed because these are fundamental. You need that change, and that will not be easy. It is very, very difficult to bring that change. But back in 1999, the Law Commission of India headed by Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy had advocated for simultaneous election. So the whole nation seems to be ideologically divided right now. But why is it such a big challenge, even if the idea is good? First, let's remember that this is not a new thing. After independence in 1950, the first ever general election of 1951 to 1952 was conducted simultaneously across India. So we had the policy of one nation, one election. The practice continued, in fact, for 3 consecutive Lok Sabhas until 1967 when it was stopped. Rather, it had to be stopped. Why? Because we all know that there are certain durations, say for example 5 years, for legislatures and parliament to function. What if there is an early dissolution in the case of an emergency, like it happened in 1959 when highlighting Article 356, citing this, the failure of constitutional machinery and emergency, the Kerala government had to be dismissed. In that case, what will happen now if there are emergency polls to be done? How can you then have them together? So that's a very big controversy. And eventually, Schedule 10th of the Constitution came. You might be aware about the 1970s period, the coalition period. Aya Ram, Gaya Ram. defections in India started. So after that, there were too many complications and one nation, one election fell out of practice. But today we are once again talking about that. But let's understand what are the basic changes that we shall need. So the biggest challenge as of now is that first we need to invest more in huge number of electronic voter machines and paper trail machines, because parallel election means you need fresh equipment in every state. Second thing, 5 critical amendments will be needed. Article 83 has to be changed relating to duration of parliament's houses, because if you want to align or create similar time frame for elections parallelly, then you have to make sure that the duration of all these houses is taken care of. Secondly, Article 85, which talks about dissolution of Lok Sabha by the president, when president is ready to dissolve or finish the tenure of Lok Sabha. In that case, what will happen? The state assemblies will still be running. There is lack of coordination. Article 172, duration of state legislatures. What if it is ready to finish? What if it is dissolved early? What if it's an emergency? Then what? Similarly, Article 174, relating to dissolution of state legislators again. Article 356, in case of an emergency, what happens if a president rule is imposed on the state? If the state government loses election, now what coordination are we talking about? So will it be easy to make all these amendments, given that it needs to be ratified by special majority? In that case, what shall we do? So these are certain contradictions that we must talk about. All in all, it has some positives, some negatives, but let's see whether we are geared up to actually follow all these amendments and then take a further step. With this, let's quickly analyze 2 mains questions. The first one says, is the implementation of UCC posed against the ethos of secularism enshrined in the Indian Constitution? Now, please understand, when we say Article 25, the right to practice, propagate and profess your unique culture, we also have something called Article 25 Subpart 1. We also have something called Article 25 Subpart 2. The first talks about India being a non-discriminatory secularism, not like Western model of hard secularism. We are soft secularism, which means government can interfere. Article 25 Part 2. If it is meant for the purpose of social reform, the government will interfere in religions, like it happened in the case of Sati, dowry, triple talaq. In that light, please answer the question. Second question, critically examine. Give both positives and negatives. The feasibility or the applicability of one nation, one election scheme being proposed by the Indian government. You need to talk about when you are critically examining something. In fact, the very word critical means both negative and positive arguments, but the word examine means pass a judgment, like a doctor examines. Please examine. What do you think is more feasible, having it or not having it, by giving all the positives and negatives. So you can talk about the documents, the details we discussed in the last part of the lecture. And now with that, I take your leave. I hope you found the session helpful. So I'll see you soon with very frequent such interesting interactive sessions. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you.